subscribe and like the video. Warner, I guess, not an advocate, but I've been warning about the fascist movement and mobilization happening in Europe and European countries, Germany included, for quite a while. And I think that there is a lot that is happening in the United States of America that ends up happening in Germany as well. Now, of course, I want to talk to you about that today, considering that there was obviously a German election that took place, and Germany's conservatives celebrated the election as the far right was carved out of the governing coalition, even though they had major victories. And I want to talk about that. I want to talk about Die Linke, but if you don't mind, let's get started on the parties in general. Like, what are some of the German parties? How does that look? And also, maybe we can do like a briefer on every individual party and the election results as well.
Yeah, so it's a bit more complicated in Germany than it is in America. In America, you got two neoliberal parties. Yeah, and in Germany we got like 20 of them. So we got a lot more neoliberal parties to choose from. And there's just like one non-neoliberal party, which is like just kind of neoliberal, which is Die Linke. So it's a classical left-wing party with some Marxist ideologies in there. And pretty much all the rest of them, like despite their color, despite their name, like even the Social Democratic Party is like neoliberal right-wing, if you ask me. So we got a lot to choose from and not much to pick for.
Yeah.
So to start at the top, which is like the party that won the election, which is like a Christian Democratic Party. Or
it's a center-right party, right? It's a center-right party.
No. Like they call themselves a center-right party, but Friedrich Merz, which will be the next chancellor of Germany, he's pretty much a light version of Donald Trump. So he worked for BlackRock for 10 years. He's a multi-millionaire. He tried to take over the party a couple of times in the past, but failed. Then Angela Merkel, after 16 years of being the chancellor, left the party or stepped back from the party, and Friedrich Merz took over. So he's pretty much a light fascist who doesn't show himself as much as he could, but he's far from being middle right or center right.
Yeah,
he's just right wing.
So the question I have for you, or I guess like the reason why I say that is because like initially, the integration programs that were put forth and like the refugee acceptance that happened was directly. I mean, that was like Merkel and the Christian Democrats were blamed for that. And then they started assuming even a more right-wing position, which, by the way, yes, I understand, like, taking advantage of refugees to build your infrastructure, I feel like, is also a historically right-wing position in general, but now it's attributed to the left, even though there's understandable reason for why, your country would open your borders into for destabilized people that have lost their homes.
Yeah. So the 5-point plan is basically it's everything they aimed for the last couple of years, and now they want to make prisons at the German border. That's pretty much what they're trying to do. We do have a policy in place that'll take the prisons on the European border, but the right-wing parties in Germany want to have those prisons at the German border. So it's pretty much just like a worse version of the European policy.
Yeah. It seems like, but that's what I mean. Like they saw the rise of the AfD and other, they saw a lot of right-wing mobilization, and they basically turned around and were like, no, we're going to be the ones who will oversee the militant border policies, not these fascists. And I feel like a similar thing also happened with Macron in France as well.
Yeah.
Where with the rise of the nationalist movement in France, Macron oversaw many of the same like anti-migrant policies and adopted them almost entirely and pushed for it aggressively. And if you ask these guys, they will say, "Oh, we're doing this because we want to stop fascism. We're capitulating to reactionary sentiment so that we can stop the fascists from gaining power and gaining momentum." That is precisely what the Democratic Party tried doing as well. But of course, they got destroyed by the Republicans in the process, and they've never really stopped trying to do that anyway.
Well, that's what they always do, right? Like as soon as the economy fails because of capitalism, they turn fascist, and they try to take all the blame and put them on the foreigners in Germany. And they did the same in Italy. They did the same in France, in Poland, Hungary. They did it in all the European countries, which is why all of Europe moves to the right wing. And now, even the Green Party, which is like the one of the more left wing parties, you could say. It's like they're neoliberal, but they're also like left wing. Like at least they were in the last couple of years, and they turned straight to the right wing policies against foreigners, and pretty much like they're in line with the AfD, which is what's happening right now. So we got a couple of parties, like 5 of them, who are just in line with AfD. They do the same policies. They're pretty much the same, except for being not as much anti-Europe as the AfD is. So the AfD wants like a German currency. They want the Deutsche Mark back, which is like catastrophic, which is like the only thing that the AfD does that the other parties don't do. So in Germany, we're pretty much, as a left winger in Germany, you're pretty much fucked at best.
Oh no, I know. Right? Oh, I see it, and I think like the Israel stuff, I think perfectly demonstrated that like in terms of German politics and the widespread adoption of like very far right sentiment on this issue. But the thing that is always shocking to me is when the German government, for example, will undermine the ICC, or when the German government will. When anyone in the, when any German politician says like, oh, the European Union, like the European Union is geared by Germany. If Germany falls, then the EU is gone. There's no more EU. Like it's the economic engine. And the same with ICC. Saying, like, sorry, go ahead.
European politics is German politics. That's what they say in Germany. Like it's not in Brussels. It's in Paris and France. That's pretty much it. And as you said with all of the Palestinian and Israel stuff, like if I'd be in Germany, like I live in Ireland, but if I'd be in Germany, I'd be in jail. Like pretty much that's just straight up it. Like we like the left movement in Germany is just as pro-Israel as like the American right-wing movement. Like as a pro-Palestinian left-winger, you're pretty much just fucked all over the place. I mean, I got a tattoo on my arm that says Palestinia. If I'd had that in Germany, like I'd be in jail.
That's pretty insane. Much. I mean, I've seen it though. I've seen it. They're fairly actively going after any kind of like mobilization that criticizes Israel. And even from what I understand, Die Linke is what we're going to be talking about today. Obviously, they gained a lot in this election, and there's some celebration that's worthy here. I think, especially as an American, it's like ridiculous for me to criticize any other country's politics in this way, because like Die Linke, even if I don't fully align with their worldview, it's like closer to me than the modern Democratic Party is. That's for sure. So, in that regard, I think there's some celebration that must be had here. Having said that, you can't have a conversation about Die Linke's massive gains without thinking about the shadow cast by the AFT's unimaginable gains in such a short period of time, becoming the second largest bloc. Now, of course, they're going to be, and you can describe this a little bit better for my audience, I hope. There's going to be some, they are not going to be a part of the governing coalition. The AFD is not going to be a part of the governing coalition. So even though they are effectively the second largest party, they're still completely shut out from the government. So that's, that's praiseworthy, I guess, or that's the reason why the right wing is celebrating in Germany.
No, yes and no, because they're being used as a tool by the Christian Democratic Union. So basically, you have to understand that for whatever reason, although we're turning back to being Nazis, like we have a problem with being called a Nazi. So the policies are the same and the thinking is the same. We're as much racist as we were in the 40s, but we have a big problem with being called racist and Nazis. And so we tried to do right-wing policies and politics, but without being called Nazis. So the Christian Democratic Union is using the AfD as a tool. Pretty much they're saying we have to work with the SPD, and if you're not doing as we please, then we're going to work together with AfD. That's what they're doing. They try. Usually we have 4 years of a government working together, and the Christian Democratic Union already says we're doing this for 1 year. So we're just restricting the time for 1 year, and we see how it goes. And if you're not doing what we want to, we work with the Nazis. This is what's happening. So they got big power. They got a huge momentum. And as a left winger in Germany, pretty much our job is to use the people that are beginning to think as a left winger, which are not many, but at least a couple of them.
So let's talk about the previous coalition. There was a three-party coalition that existed, and it was always from what I understand, it always was seemingly struggling. And now CDU in this instance is able to gain more momentum. Can you talk about the previous coalition and the FDP?
They weren't struggling. Like, that's what they're saying, and people are excusing for them being struggling. But the government didn't struggle, and also the coalition didn't struggle, but the world was struggling. So we had Corona, and we had the Ukraine war, and this was pretty much a major factor for our economy. And that's the reason why the government didn't do as well as they could have done without all those crises. And they did more, I think they did 70% of what they promised to do, which is more than any other government in the history of Germany did. So they pretty much did a great job, although they didn't do what I wanted them to do, but that's a whole nother level. But they did as they promised, and they did a lot better than any other German government in the past. But the right-wing movement, so Christian Democratic Union and AfD, they took all the economic crisis and said, well, that's because of the government. And people took the pill. So what are you going to do?
Yeah. I mean, for Western liberal capitalist countries, this was obviously the incumbent disadvantage election globally. And that's the reason why, it was partially the reason why even the Tories lost in the UK. So whoever was in charge that oversaw the cost of living crisis was basically left with all of the blame. And I think that the right wing obviously took advantage of that. Having said that, I think that their solutions ultimately are not going to solve any of the problems that exist, and only make things worse overall.
Yeah. Well, and there's another factor that you have to take into consideration, because the FDP was basically just openly sabotaging the government the last 3 years. So they said it. So usually the government works for 4 years. This time there were new elections after just 3 years, because the FDP was basically just sabotaging the government, and they had no chance but to do re-elections, right? So
yeah.
Well, at least they're not in the government as of now, so they didn't get enough votes, which is good. But this was a major factor for the last government not being as successful as they could have been.
So the way this works is, if you don't get 50% majority, if no singular party reaches 50% majority, then they have to set up a coalition, right?
Yeah.
And it seems like the Christian Democrats are going to set up a coalition with the SPD once again,
yes,
as they have in the past. And therefore, I mean, that I suspect is what's going to take place, right? That's the
yeah. It's not as much about percentages as it is about seats. So you need a couple of seats, I think it's 316 as of now that you need to form a government. So or 306, I don't know. But at this place, we're going to get the Christian Democratic Union and SPD government, which is basically a given.
Yeah, 316 seats total.
Yeah.
Right? So
that is a given.
Yeah. What do you I mean, what have they signaled that these two parties are going to do? Because SPD, can you describe to my American audience like what SPD is and
Yeah.
how they present themselves versus like what their current alignment is, what their current ideological alignment is?
I think in Germany they call them the socialists. So, but in Germany,
Yeah.
like in America, everything that is like just slightly left wing is a socialist. So they're far from being socialists. Like they're like a neoliberal, just centric party that does everything they have to do to stay in power or to take the power, and they're doing nothing that could be considered left wing for 20 to 25 years. So they destroyed the social state. They present themselves as a labor party, which is kind of the whole identity of being like a labor party, just like doing the stuff that the others wouldn't do, being like a classical Marxist left-wing party. But they, like, ever since the KPD, so the Communist Party in Germany, split themselves from the SPD, there's not much of a socialist view left in the SPD. So the difference between SPD and CDU isn't as large as you'd think. So they pretty much do the same Eurocentric neoliberal politics, and they're great coalition partners. Like they work together for like 20 years, the last couple of years. I'm 36 years of age, and I can't imagine like SPD and CDU. It's basically the government. They're doing coalitions all the time for 20 years, and they're doing much the same. CDU says what has to be done, and SPD just like they do nothing.
So
Pretty much like
let me ask you something,
nothing.
Carl. There are a lot of, I would say, German liberals who are frustrated with your commentary, and it's something that I'm very familiar with. Liberals being frustrated with your commentary.
That, yeah.
What is their assessment? And I asked chat this as well. What is your assessment, chat? The German liberals specifically, like what is your problem with what Carl has said so far? Because it seems like maybe, I mean, I've seen a lot of people that support the Greens saying that the Greens are actually leftists. Yeah. I've seen a lot of people chime in and say the SPD is not neoliberal. But I mean,
which is crazy, but okay.
It seems like, from what my assessment, and this is reductive, but I saw basically the Christian Democrats and SPD and even the Greens as like numerous different parts of the Democratic Party, even the FDP, as a matter of fact, very similar to the American Democratic Party, but they just all have like different facets of the American Democratic Party, because we have our crazy neoliberals who like immediately want to implement free market principles on the one hand. We have our obviously relatively socially conservative right-wing Democrats out there, the Blue Dog Democrats and the Problem Solvers Caucus here in America. So like I think all of these parties that I have basically pointed to make up different parts of the Democratic Party. And I would even go so far as say Die Linke as well would make up like the super progressive wing of the Democratic Party, like the AOCs and the Bernie Sanderses of the Dems as well.
I wouldn't say so, because I heard a great thinker in Germany who says if you take all the policies that Die Linke tries to implement and you just implement 50% of them, that's the end of capitalism. Like, and it's pretty much just the truth. So they're okay. Very like they have some great Marxist thinkers in the lead as of now for the last couple of months, and they're doing great work. So I'd say if you want to vote for a left-wing party, then you have to vote for Die Linke. The only reason like the communists in Germany and also those like ultra left-wing people in Germany aren't much of fan of Die Linke is because they're against parliamentism itself, against the democracy as it is, and because of their statements or missing statements about the in Israel and Palestine. So that's the only two reasons that I can think of that people aren't happy with Die Linke. But besides that, they're doing great work. And all those other parties, they're pretty much neoliberal. So none of them is socialist. None of them, like, some are like more progressive than the others when it comes to society. So SPD and Grüne and FDP, they're all for like homosexual rights and trans rights and stuff like that, but not as much as Die Linke. So even when it comes to the society, the Die Linke is much more progressive than all those other parties. And when it comes to like economics, like all of them are pretty much doing the same work. Like all of them are neoliberal.
Okay, so Die Linke, from what I understand, has both, some pro-Palestinian sentiment that they've expressed, but also not enough, and a lot of people that a lot of people are complaining in the chat that they've like actively worked against some of the pro-Palestinians in their ranks as well.
They did. They threw out a couple of activists out of the party because like I don't understand Germans when it comes to Palestinian anyway. So like it's hard for me to talk about it. Like a friend of mine, Abdul Shahin, who's like a Palestinian, he said the like the time when I listen to white people about Palestine is over. Like I don't listen to them anymore. Like don't talk to me about the topic. You have no idea whatsoever, and you'll never have. So just shut the up and like let's keep going, right? And this is pretty much my view on the whole like Palestinian. Like Friedrich Merz, the first thing he did was invite Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yeah, that's pretty insane.
That pretty much tells the story, right?
So that tells a really scary story, because the ICC, much like many European institutions, is almost entirely protected by Germany. And if it wasn't for Germany, then like the ICC is a completely toothless institution. One could say that it already is, unless they're going after warlords in Africa, or as Lindsey Graham once famously said, thugs like Putin. With the exception of those territories that the ICC covers, like Germany is supposed to be the protective party over the ICC. So when Germany invites Netanyahu, that is directly undermining the ICC's power. It's saying that the ICC is over. There is nothing.
Yeah, it's anarchy. Like
Putin is objectively bad, though. Come on. Yes, I know. I'm just simply stating that so is Benjamin Netanyahu. It would be ridiculous if he said Putin can come to Germany, without fear of repercussions. Everyone would understandably get mad at him. But when he says Benjamin Netanyahu can violate the ICC arrest warrant and come to Germany without any fears, this is not seen as like a direct shot at the remaining power and influence that this International Criminal Court has.
Yeah, it's just a kick in the balls for the ICC as a whole. Like Germany was that one European country that took the ICC and put it about everything else. And historically, it's a pretty bad hit for the ICC in general, because it says you can do whatever the you want to as long as you're in line with America. That's pretty much what that says. And we have no party except for the Linke who stood up and said, no, that's not going to happen. Because Jan van Aken, who's like the head of the Linke, or one of the two heads of the Linke, he says like he's going to go to jail if he tries.
Yeah, this is completely unacceptable. Like I don't think people understand how serious this is. Like this is why I kept repeating over and over again, and many Germans in my chat and many Europeans in my chat get mad at me, but like every country is now becoming Viktor Orban. A lot of the Western European nations made fun of Viktor Orban for understandable reasons for the longest time. And now slowly but surely, they are moving in the Viktor Orban direction. Maybe they're not linking up with Vladimir Putin directly, but these kinds of actions are also beneficial for Putin as well. When you undermine the ICC's authority, you're basically saying, yeah, there is no international justice. There is no international court. There is no international law, because Germany is the protectorate of the ICC. The entire like post-World War II, whether you want to say it's like an aesthetic development or not, the entire rebuilding of the nation revolves around like holding on to these values, right?
Well, Germany is Europe. That's just pretty much as it is. Like if you talk about the European Union or Europe as a whole, you talk about Germany and France. That's pretty much it. So if you underline the ICC and you do not arrest Benjamin Netanyahu, all your words from the past have no meaning whatsoever. Because like Viktor Orban, he invited Putin, and we did it. Well, like we we exploded, like German media exploded. We're like, you can't do that. That's like an ICC warrant, and you can't talk to him. You can't invite him to your country. Now we're pretty much doing basically the same with Netanyahu, and no one says anything, which is crazy to me. But go deal with it. That's Germany.
So, let's talk about Die Linke's victory, specifically reaching 9% almost with 4.3 million votes. They got 64 seats. They were the most popular party under 18. They were the most popular party between 18 and 24, with the second most popular party, if I'm not mistaken, being AFD still, but I might be wrong about that.
No, it's true.
And that's still obviously, I mean, that's a good thing overall. What do you attribute to Die Linke's victories in this last election?
Well, it was the focus. They focus on class war. So it was the first time in years. Like, I can't imagine a time where like a left-wing party in Germany did such a good, amazing focus on class war. They were talking about workers' right. They were talking about rents. They were talking about like food and beverage prices. It was basically just all economics. It was like you struggle and we have problems, and those problems are the money. You're missing money. We're going to get you the money, and we're going to get you the money from the rich people. That was basically everything they did, and they're like a strict anti-fascist polity, and that's the reason why they got almost 9%, which is great.
Yeah. So I am a firm and committed believer that austerity is what has made Europe more reactionary. Austerity implemented by neoliberal parties, the undermining of social safety nets, and also the privatization of the already undermined social safety nets that make these services that were previously controlled by the government worse and worse overall. And in that anger and resentment, you create an environment that is perfectly captured by right-wing reactionary movements, blaming migrants, blaming gay people, engaging in culture wars and the like. So seeing a party actively combat that and then try to bring the conversation back to how the government can help you, especially when you have like some semblance of social safety nets and a defense of said things, is ultimately a good thing. But it's clear that
compared to America, we have a great social security system. Like compared to America, like Germany is great. Like, we're not as good as Scandinavian countries are, but we are a lot better than the US is doing. But we could do a lot better. So we're privatizing like the whole, like, we're not buying houses, we're renting houses, which is the reason why capitalists profit from those house rent prices. And they go up and up and up and up by 40% the last 5 years, which is like, the capitalists do what they always do. Like, whenever there's a crisis, economic crisis like Corona or the Ukraine war, like people are expecting that the prices go up. So, and as they were expecting that the prices go up, like, the capitalists took the prices and just skyrocketed them to the max. So they did maximum profits over the last couple of years, and everyone's blaming it on the foreigners, which is kind of crazy because, like, there's a German politician who's Gregor Gysi, who says, like, a couple of years ago, 10 years ago, there weren't as many foreigners in Germany as there are now. And the rent prices were up as well. And you didn't have just €1 more in your pocket. So how can the foreigners be responsible for the lack of money in your pocket? Which is a question that no one can answer. But like,
this is something that I talk about all the time. It's undocumented migrants are not your landlords. Your landlords are the ones who are raising the rents, and your politicians are the ones who are in the pockets of landlords who refuse to increase the housing supply. So that's a great way to communicate. I just seeing the rise of the AFD, though, are people actually listening? Especially considering that the CDU also still improved its stances, from what I understand. Improved its standing. Sorry, from what I understand. So you got gains on the CDU side, and you got major gains on AFD. What does that say about German politics, the state of German politics right now?
Well, the German society is just like they buy the picture of the bad illegal immigrant who's responsible for the shit that's happening. So we got historically low crime rates in Germany. Like, the crime rates aren't as high as like the media and the people are trying to tell the German people. And we're just trying to build the feeling of you have to be afraid, and you have to be afraid of the foreigner. Because the illegal immigrant is the source of all our problems. And if we get rid of them, if we get rid of the Muslims, like, which is, it's not the foreigners, it's just like the non-white people, like, just say it as it is. It's just straight up racism. We do not have a problem with like Ukrainian people or with Polish people or with French people. We have a problem with like the Muslims, like the Turks, the Arabic countries. Like, we have a problem with those people. So if you come to Germany and you're not white, you have a problem at the moment, because people are buying that you're responsible for pretty much every problem that is in Germany right now. So whether it being the crime rates, whether it being like economic crisis, whether it being like, just pretty much imagine any problem, and the answer from CDU and AfD and SPD and the Green Party is, well, it's illegal immigrants. So I think 70% of the people who voted yesterday, the most important topic for them was illegal immigrants. 70%, which is crazy. In 2021, like climate justice and well, like war and corona and stuff like that was on our agenda. So those were the topics that you could win an election with. This year, it's illegal immigrants. So, and this is the reason why even the SPD and the Green Party focused on illegal immigrants and what we can do to get rid of the illegal immigrants, which is pretty much nothing, because, like, first and foremost, they're not illegal. Second of all, it's because of the Dublin Amendment. So Germany is in a pretty privileged position that if we hold European law, then we do not have any immigrants whatsoever. No one can enter Germany because we're in the middle of it and we have no border. So we have no European border. So no immigrant can enter Germany without breaking a law. So German politics at the moment are saying, like, we do not want any immigrants whatsoever. We just want the ones who work, which is like a classic capital argument. You're not looking at the human, you're looking at the resource. If you work, you're good. If you're not working, get the f out.
Yeah, that's also an interesting position, because I guess like Germany's right wing also has this position, as opposed to, like, I would say the British right wing, whereas the British right wing and even Brexit was caused not only because of their version of the quote unquote refugee and Islam problem, but beyond that, they were very frustrated with like Polish migrants coming in, well, not even migrants, but like a Polish workforce coming in, which they perceived as like displacing the existing British labor pool. And
Yeah.
I feel like in Germany, there's a difference where some of the right wing parties still have a very like hardline approach, which is maybe born out of German history post World War II, bringing in migrants specifically to work in German industry. Turks obviously being a major group here, where they just simply look at it with a with this cold approach, where they're like, yeah, you can come in, you just have to work for much cheaper.
Yeah.
Is the AFD's stance on this similar, or do they want to just eradicate all across the board, like no more migrants whatsoever?
In public, yes. Like in public, like people like Alice Weidel, she's someone who's in public saying that we need immigrants, and as long as you're paying your taxes, doing your work, as long as you assimilate, you're fine and you have nothing to worry. But behind closed doors, like the AfD it's run by Nazis, like just straight up literal Nazis, like,
Yeah, like
the same
the hookah
thinking
guy, right? That dude is like a straight up Nazi.
Yeah, he is. Like he's a fascist. He's a Nazi in every way. Like he'd walk next to Hitler if he'd had the chance to. So the AfD is run by literal Nazis, but they trying to be like just like a mild liberal right wing party. So we have no problem with foreigners in general. We have no problem with any race or any ethnicity or any religion in general. It's just the criminal ones, and it's the ones that are not working and destroying our social state. So in the 90s, we had some right-wing party, NPD, which is similar to NSDAP. It was a national party, Germany. And they realized that the German society is not ready for getting rid of all the foreigners. So they had to tell a story. And their story was that we have no problem with foreigners or immigrants, but we do have a problem with the criminal ones and the ones that are not working. And pretty much ever since, every right-wing party in Germany is doing the same story. Like we're super liberal, like we're super friendly, like the world is our friend, but we have criminal ones and we have the non-working ones, and we have to get rid of them. So this is also the public state of the AfD. But behind closed doors, make no mistakes, the party is run by Nazis.
Yeah. So what do you suspect is going to happen for the future of German politics? I can tell you what I suspect is happening, which is that whichever governing coalition exists, it's going to be very right wing. It's going to basically try to take up as many of the, I guess, quote unquote populist stances, like the right wing nationalist stances that AfD has, and try to get ahead of the nationalists. Try to get ahead of the nationalists, like securing a governing coalition next time around. But in that process, that capitulation will normalize more and more right-wing positions, as it has already, and then people will say, okay, well, we don't want the diet thing. We want the real thing. Like we want AfD.
Yeah,
that's what my assessment is on this, and that's precisely what's happening in the UK with the reform movement as well. As people are immediately frustrated with the current Labor administration and the after years and years of Tory austerity, the Labor administration has not really dramatically changed the direction of the British economy. So the reform movement is growing in the UK, and I think that the AfD will grow in Germany if left unchecked, if they don't actually change their policies, and I don't think they will.
Yeah.
What do you say to that?
Well, Die Linke has an answer for that, which is called anti-fascist economies. So we need a strong social state. We need to solve the problems that the people are having, like lower the rents, lower the prices, lower everything that is like that the people are struggling with. And as long as the people are happy, fascists can't grow, which is pretty much a theory that goes around for a couple of years, and we're trying to do that. It's pretty hard because we're not doing any of this. So we're going to get rid of some foreigners, like the illegal immigrants will go, like a couple of thousand of them will be deported. I don't know where, but they're going to get deported. And
I thought they don't call it deportation, they call it remigration, I thought.
Yeah, remigration is like it's deportation. Like
yeah, no, I know. I'm joking, but
right?
that is what, because like I feel like deportation in and of itself has a different meaning in the minds of Germans, at least for German history. So they actively, even the AfD will try to actively liberalize their reactionary sentiment here and say no, we don't want deportations, we want remigration.
Yeah, remigration it was a huge scandal because remigration is just like deportation, a word that Germans don't use. We call it, well, let's get them back home. So we're euphemizing everything that has to do with deportation, but it's deportation. Like we're gonna get them to prisons if we don't know where to put them. So it's deportation. Like we're gonna deport a couple of thousands of them, and no problem's gonna get solved. So the people are still angry. And then the AfD is gonna rise even more, in my opinion, because like the AfD is a party that can go even further than what the CDU and the SPD is doing right now. So right now we're talking about illegal immigrants. So, but where are you going to do if the illegal immigrants aren't in your country anymore? You go to the immigrants, right?
Yeah.
You take the illegal and you get rid of the word illegal, and you just take the immigrants, like the non-white people in Germany. So the AfD is gonna radicalize even more, or just take more of their already radicalized ideology to the public. And let's hope that the German population doesn't swallow that pill. Like I'm hopeful, I'm motivated, because Die Linke is a really strong party, and I think that as of right now we have a huge left-wing movement in the German youth. So we can mobilize the people for class war and be a good solidarity force, and like just put some millions Germans on the streets. Like Germans usually aren't protesting as much as they are in in France or in America, but we got to get used to that, I guess.
So, what do you say to people that claim that Die Linke's advancements simply were to take away from SPD and Grüne's? They just basically took some of the SPD and Green Party voters, and that it's ultimately marginal. And then the other question that I have for you also is why the AfD is so popular in Eastern Germany, because a lot of Americans don't understand the difference and think that it is because, that's where all the migrants are, that's where all the migrant crime is or whatever. But I think that they don't understand what the full picture is.
No. So first question, yes, that's true. Like 600,000 voters just directly voted Die Linke instead of Grüne. So obviously they take voters from SPD and the Green Party. But I think it's a good thing because SPD and the Green Party aren't left-winged. So, and Die Linke is. So if you're a left-winger, you got to vote for a left party if you're voting.
Yeah.
So having a strong left-wing party in the parliament is pretty important, and standing up for what you believe in is also very important if you believe in democracy and parliamentism. So if you vote as a left wing in Germany, you can't vote tactical for the SPD or the Green Party, because you're basically going to get the same politics that you're going to get with the CDU. So CDU with SPD, there's no difference from CDU and the Green Party. It would have been the same. And why are there like more right-wing people in Eastern Germany? Because Eastern Germany's economies are even more fucked than in Western Germany.
Yeah.
Like in the 90s, West Germany, like when the Soviet Union fell and the DDR, when the DDR was being like took over by Western Germany, like from that point on, West Germany fucked Eastern Germany whenever they had the chance to. Like we privatized everything. Like there are a lot of people that are unemployed. Like they lost their houses, they lost their money, they lost their properties, they lost their working place, they lost everything. And Western Germany privatized whatever they wanted to. So whatever, like whenever there's a crisis, the crisis hits Eastern Germany even harder than West Germany.
Yeah.
Which is the reason why the people in Eastern Germany are much more radicalized, like 30% AfD and 15% Die Linke.
Yeah. And also, one note here, but yes, Americans don't understand this, but like there are more, I guess, quote unquote, foreigners in Western Germany than there are in the Eastern Germany territories that the AfD actually dominated. And a similar thing actually happens in America as well. So many rural areas that are not diverse at all make these anti-diversity picks, these anti-diversity initiatives. They get swept away by that, thinking that, black and brown people are coming in and changing their culture or taking their jobs, stealing their jobs, when in fact it's quite literally not the case. And more diverse environments with actual, like places where there are actually undocumented immigrants, for example, in higher numbers, are oftentimes Democratic Party strongholds in general.
Yeah. Well, obviously, like wherever there's a university in Eastern Germany, like people are voting left-winged. So when there's people around and the city's diverse, then they're not voting AfD. Like it's pretty much the same all around the country. Like if a white person meets a non-white person and realize, well, he's not as bad as I thought, then people, like things change for the better. But Eastern Germany has like, I think between 2 and 7% foreigners, whereas in Western Germany it's like 35%, even 40 in some cities.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Carl. Is there anything we missed that you want to say before I let you go?
But it's not like German politics aren't as different from the American ones. It's just like we have more parties doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Like in America, you got 2 parties basically doing the same thing. In Germany, we have like 6 of them, or 20. So it's all around the world. It's the same.
Yeah, that's what I try to describe to people. I mean, I come from a background in Turkish politics where like you I understand what it's like when you have a multi-party parliamentary structure, which, I mean, Turkey's now a presidential system. There's a constitutional reform that took place, but you know, the alignment still basically falls into the two different camps. And oftentimes there's still a uniparty understanding. At least in America, there's a lot of uniparty when it comes to deregulation. It's mostly in the margins, those differences. Like the Democrats will deregulate marginally less than the Republicans, but ultimately, when it comes to foreign policy, it's completely uniparty as well. Having said that, in the European parliamentary structures, the coalitions that they build basically create the same exact outcome.
Yeah. It's neoliberalism. Like everywhere you look, it's the same in America as it is in Europe, and especially in Germany. Like we profit from capitalism all around the place, and we turn to fascism whenever there's a crisis. So that's the same. Like it's happening to you in America, and it must be very hard to be a left wing in America at the moment. So stay strong to my comrades in America. Just stay strong, and I don't know. Like I really don't know what to do against Trump, because he's like pretty much doing the German playbook as of right now.
Yeah. Oh, you mean the old German playbook?
The old German playbook.
Yeah. Exactly.
The liberal one, but he's doing the old German one.
Oh yeah.
It's funny, like you say, history repeats itself, but I could not think that it would repeat itself in America, but it is.
Oh yeah, no, it is.
Unfortunately.
And it took less than 100 years for us to just like snap back, because I guess capitalism is inevitably going to yield crisis, and in that crisis, fascists will obviously create a semblance of stability, and in that circumstance, capitalists have a decision to make: where do they still want to maintain the same old hierarchies, even if it's done with the steel grip of fascists? Will they be able to restore order that way, as long as they retain the same hierarchies, or will they join the right side of history and maybe actively fight against it? But I do think that one thing is clear, and that is that neoliberalism is on its last leg in general, born out of all of its victories in the post-Cold War era, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, if we're not solving the problem, then the climate is going to solve the problem, right? Which is pretty much
it's going to wipe us all out. Left. Yeah, or nuclear war. Who knows?
Who knows? It's going to be good times in the future. Good times in the future. Well, last words: stay strong to my comrades in America. Just never give up. Never take a step back from fascism. Like as a German, I know what you're going through at the moment. Although not in person, but my ancestors did. It's a pretty rough time, but rough times always we're gonna come through. Like you're gonna come through. Let's hope Germany's not taking the same path.
All right. Thanks a lot, Carl.
Take care, Hasan.
Bye. All right, ladies and gentlemen. That was our German counterpart, German leftist streamer, Dick Carl Dent. And you can find his information here as well. I'm going to continue talking about the German elections, but we're going to take a step back and cover it from a historical approach. The approach is coming from Bestie Marks, friend of the show. Bestie Marks made a YouTube video tracing AfD's history back to Germany and how similar their policies were. We're gonna start off with this one. The video is called "The AfD's Nazi Connections Run Deeper Than You Think." 23-minute from Bestie Mark, and why it's so scary that the AfD actually gained a lot of seats and a lot of momentum in German politics.
Fight!
I gotta pee.
The far-right AfD is surging. 1 in 5 Germans would now vote for them. Yet, while many insist the AfD are not Nazis, a more unsettling reality lurks just beneath the surface. The party thrives on the normalization of far-right ideology. And here's the real question. Have the seemingly anti-fascist liberal parties, through their own policies on migration, economic equality, and foreign intervention, helped create the very conditions that fueled the AfD's rise?
Dass selbst ein Teil der Grünen inzwischen AfD-Position übernimmt, nennen wir eine Zeitenwende.
Today, we're breaking down the AfD's secret and not-so-secret connections to neo-Nazi structures, the role of mainstream politics in normalizing the far right, and why the AfD is only a symptom of something much deeper. Subscribe, hit the like button, and let's get into it. Before starting, I want to say a massive thank you to all those who support the channel on Patreon. All the research and editing takes up a huge amount of time, and your contributions make a huge difference. Every new Patreon matters, so check out the link in the description if you want to support this type of work. Thank you. In 2023, The Spiegel magazine uncovered a secret strategy meeting hosted by the AfD's youth wing, Junge Alternative, short JA. The exact location of the meeting remained secret for a long time. The invitation only mentioned a general area. The guests arrived discreetly. In late February, just over 50 people gathered at Hofrien in Uchte, Lower Saxony, to discuss the Roaring Twenties. One speaker was a certain Peter Steinborn, former leader of the youth wing of the party called NPD. Another speaker was Dominik Asch, a JA leader who often wears a Thor's hammer around his neck, and who gave a lecture on meta-politics, in which he explains how to occupy the pre-political space to shift German discourse to the right. The AfD has been talking about this strategy openly for a long time. So why the secrecy? To understand, we must go back to the beginnings. The emergence of the AfD was a direct product of the international financial market crisis in 2010. Founded in 2013 by neoliberal economists and conservative elites, the AfD was initially a response to the euro crisis, much like other far-right, so-called Eurosceptic organizations in Europe. These so-called professors opposed the EU bailouts, not because they disagreed with the disastrous measures imposed on more dependent European countries, but because they wanted to protect German capital from weaker economies like Greece. But as global capitalism continued to unravel after the shock, the AfD adapted. By 2015, with the arrival of refugees fleeing imperialist wars, the party clearly had shifted gears, embracing a racist rhetoric to redirect working-class anger away from the ruling class. It achieved quick success. The media and sections of the German bourgeoisie tolerated this shift, using the AfD to push politics further to the right. On March 25, 2010, Chancellor Angela Merkel said at an EU summit that she agreed to the first bailout package for Greece. The justification of her decision as "without alternative" became a widely used phrase and served as an inspiration for the name of the AfD. The emergence and growth of far-right politics reflects a broader crisis of hegemony. One historical example is, of course, the rise of the NSDAP during the hyperinflation in the 20s. These crises facilitate the bourgeoisie's...
Kill yourself, you disgusting sympathizer. I hope you know that this is, probably going to get you a site-wide ban. I would urge against it. It's not something that I'm, unfamiliar with. A lot of people say this to me all the time. But, you have an 8-year-old account. You've been on this platform since 2017, and now you just have a site-wide ban, Kind of seems silly to do, don't you think? Like, why would you just burn an 8-year-old account? You've been on the platform for 8 years to say something that I've heard a million times over, Pokimane, Gotchigasm. Are you going to stream after the 7-day ban? Or will you put less emphasis on Twitch after? I want to sub to you, but now I also don't want to support Twitch. Call destiny. Imagine thinking supporting Twitch is less worse than posting a mean message. Well, the problem here is I don't actually support Twitch, but you did openly and foolishly say, kill yourself to a streamer. You must ask yourself why you are this angry and this resentful. Does he think you support Israel? I think maybe he's confused. Maybe he thinks I'm in support of Israel. Yeah. All right. You just support Hamas. They get kisses from their hostages. Totally normal. I support Palestinian emancipation. If you want to, if you want to make sure that Hamas doesn't exist, okay, then you have to end the occupation. It's pretty simple. Olive oil giveaway when, by the way, more important than this weird person? What do you mean olive oil giveaway? It's pretty simple. Do you support an end to the Israeli occupation? That's it. How does your psyche handle having vitriol directed to you every day, babe? I'm very used to it at this point. I mean, there's not really... I've heard everything. It's usually not. Usually I don't really get any comments that are new or unique. I'm fairly desensitized to it. People never actually want to have a cordial disagreement or a constructive criticism directed in my way. They just immediately go, you love terrorism. You're a fan of terrorism. It's pretty easy to shrug that off. Anyway, let's continue.
Blaming of minorities and the so-called far left for society's problems, directing anger away from the rich through constructing a narrative of national decline and racial purity. According to the Comintern or Italian communist Antonio Gramsci's analyses, fascism emerges as a response to the dominant ideology's failure to pacify the working class through peaceful means, requiring openly authoritarian tools to crush proletarian movements to preserve the capitalist order. Quote, it became clear after the war that it was impossible for the Italian bourgeoisie to go on ruling with a democratic system. For now, there's no need of this. Bourgeois democratic respectability is still a requirement to gain mainstream support. The AfD figure that represents that is the woman at the head of the German far-right party. Alice Weidel, or as a tweet called her, lesbian wine mom Hitler, is the co-leader of the AfD and her party's chancellor candidate for the coming elections, and the most popular one in Germany. The former investment banker who lives in Switzerland presents herself as a champion of the ordinary people, ranting against the so-called global elites, undermining German nationhood, while working with the rich herself.
Who else did that? In important periods, important time frames in German history. Who else did an identical thing where they would rally the troops and talk about the average German working class that was getting fucked over by groups that were undermining Germany from within, while also simultaneously working hand in glove with capital owners? In like the 30s, I can't seem to place my finger on it, but...
We've talked about the exact same hypocrisy regarding Giorgia Meloni. Another glaring...
Bicycle bastard. What a name. Thank you for the 10 gift
double
subs.
standard is her advocacy for traditional heterosexual relationships, despite being in a same-sex partnership with a Sri Lankan-born woman.
Ich bin nicht queer, sondern ich bin mit einer Frau verheiratet, die ich seit 20 Jahren kenne. Wir haben 2 gemeinsame Kinder.
On the topic of prison sentences for homosexuality, one AfD parliament member said we should do that in Germany too. But her main issue is, of course, immigration. Much like...
I just Googled this Hitler bloke. Not good. Yeah. Not good.
Other far-right racists, she described multiculturalism as a failed concept and warned of the Islamization of Germany, spreading replacement theory conspiracies, calling for a return to a Germany for Germans, dreaming of a fortress Europa. The former co-leader of the party alongside Weidel stated, "We must close the borders and then endure the cruel images." On the topic of migration, AfD politicians have put out statements reminiscent of the most Hitlerite of Hitlerites. We must, of course, dispose of such people. The refugee doesn't care at which border, Greek or German, he dies. The whole development we are witnessing right now, the creation of a mixed peoples to erase national identities, and with that, the surrender of sovereignty to the EU, is simply unbearable. And with this guy, it gets especially ugly. I have a vision now. If things go well in Germany, we will eventually have a kind of...
Guys, I'm going to be honest. The vibes with this AfD party are not great. And also quite similar to that previous politician that I was talking about, this Adolf guy. Also not great. Not good at all, it seems.
Of apartheid state, like in South Africa back then, where whites just somehow keep the rest in check. Once we finally get there, we'll line them all up against the wall, dig a pit, throw them all in, and dump quicklime on top. Now, hearing the word deportation over and over again might seem almost normalized in the former Hitler country, because it is.
Would you force them back to Syria?
Deportation ist ein Begriff, den wir überhaupt nicht verwenden. Das ist ein Nazi-Begriff und Zwangsdeportation gibt es für uns überhaupt nicht. Zum Schluss auch mit Abschiebung, natürlich. Das ist Teil des deutschen Rechtssystems, auch des europäischen Rechtssystems. Rückführung, Abschiebung. Abschiebung ist der fachliche Begriff bei der Polizei.
You don't like the word deportation because of its historical connotations, but whatever you call it, that's the reality for these people, isn't it?
Wenn Sie das Deportation nennen, hat das einen völlig falschen Zungenschlag. Das wollen wir nicht.
People forget that before the systemic mass extermination of Jewish people, the Nazis called for deportations to create a physically cleansed Germany, free of Jews, for instance, by deporting Jews out of their homes into ghettos and to drive them into Soviet territory. Although, needless to say, supporting Jews is also still normal for ruling German parties. Today, virtually all the major parties are in favor of deportations. According to liberal logic, if the center-left parties didn't argue for it, they would lose voters to the far right. So to them, stopping the far right means becoming the far right themselves. But also, they serve to create scapegoats such as migrants, anti-Semitic Muslims, and so-called cultural elites to direct anger away from those in power. The Greens and the SPD, despite their progressive anti-fascist branding, frame migration as a security issue, thus contributing to the dehumanization of migrants and reinforcing the narrative that they are a threat to social cohesion. This rhetoric not only legitimizes the AfD's xenophobic agenda, but also undermines solidarity among the working class, dividing it along ethnic lines. But, much like Italy's Giorgia Meloni, Alice Weidel is still the quote-unquote polished bourgeois democratic face of the AfD. So much so that neo-Nazis online call her a puppet and a traitor, especially after she said that Hitler was a communist.
Back then, during the Third Reich, the National Socialists, as the word says, they were socialists. Adolf Hitler, yeah.
Incredible, by the way. Incredible for any German to say this. It's like directly your history. Okay? Yeah. Americans say this all the time, but Americans are stupid. It's very cool that Germans can be just as stupid as Americans. I love that. Actually. Fantastic. Look her up. Her grandfather was a judge. Yeah. That's why she knows better. She's like, yeah, my grandfather, who was a big socialist, loved socialism. They loved socialists so much they killed them, even within their ranks, and said socialism was a Jewish invention to undermine the superior German race. You know, classic socialist stuff.
They nationalized industries like crazy.
Yes, absolutely. He was a communist.
They did not do that.
And he considered himself as a socialist.
What they'd like to see is another prominent AfD leader at the top. One who before Weidel became known internationally was the most famous AfD figure. And that man is waiting in the wings. Björn Höcke is a leading figure of the AfD and head of the party in Thüringen. Influenced by his anti-communist father, he began to work as a teacher after studying sports and history. In an NPD magazine, it's pretty much confirmed that he wrote articles under the pseudonym Landolf Ladig, praising the ideas of the NPD, glorifying the Nazi regime, claiming that foreign powers have been envious of the Germans' discipline, and spoke of a revolution brought closer by self-amplifying crisis dynamics. The identitarian system opposition must take the lead in this revolution to introduce the organic market economy based on racial biology. The publisher of the magazine is a close friend of Höcke, one certain Thorsten Heise, a current leader of the NPD, and one of the most influential German far-right ideologues. The convicted has organized skinhead concerts and gatherings. Following the denier David Irving, Höcke stated in a letter that the air raids on Dresden in 1945 were a violation of international law, quote, "Never before in world history, and never afterward, were so many people moved from life to death in such a short time." Höcke had to promise his school administration that he would never again publicly express such views as a teacher. In 2010, at the commemoration of the Dresden bombings, he demonstrated alongside neo-Nazis. According to a former student, Höcke, as a teacher, repeatedly praised the work of Psychology of the Masses by Gustave Le Bon and often spoke about charisma, told stories of his grandfather's meeting with Adolf Hitler, and described Hitler's incredibly blue eyes as a central element of the Führer cult. He was fascinated by Nordic mythology and regularly wore a Mjölnir pendant around his neck. 2 years later, he called the Memorial in Berlin a monument of shame, invoked the idea of a reversal of history, demanding that Germany stop its culture of remembrance and reclaim its identity. In speeches, he refers to a 1,000-year Germany.
I wonder what he's talking about. I'm a little confused. Like, what does he mean?
A phrase that reminds of Hitler's concept of the 1,000-year Reich and uses concepts like Lebensraum. His 2018 book includes passages eerily similar to the works of SS figures. I am convinced that the Germans' longing for a historical figure who will one day heal the wounds in the nation, overcome the divisions and put things in order is deeply rooted in our souls. In 2019, media reports began revealing that Höcke attended secret far-right meetings where he discussed plans for remigration, a euphemism for ethnic cleansing, used by right-wing extremists. In a 2021 speech, he got fined 13,000 euros for using a forbidden Sturmabteilung slogan, Alles für Deutschland, everything for Germany. Just last year, he was banned again.
Yeah, he messed up. He should have said the alternative. It is pretty funny that these guys have to like operate within these liberal boundaries, but it's clear that like those liberal boundaries in terms of like free speech and whatnot, like restrictions on hate speech in general has not really stopped them, you know? Yeah, guardrails are made out of cardboard, exactly.
And for chanting the first part, encouraging the audience to reply with the rest. While the National Party leadership maintains a facade of respectability, Höcke is a direct link between AfD politics and hardcore ideology. And this is very important to understand. Fascism is not something that wins or loses during one election. It is the result of a systemic shift over a long period of time. Take the CDU-CSU Conservative Party, for instance, which invoked the Brandmauer firewall against any cooperation with the AfD. But over time, they've been gradually softening this stance, and this year, the CDU has finally cooperated with the AfD in the parliament for the first time, a historic turning point, opening up the possibility to have a far-right party in the German government for the first time since World War II. Also, take the complicity of the liberal parties, which are ultimately constrained by their commitment to maintain the capitalist order, prioritizing economic stability and the interests of the bourgeoisie over the needs of marginalized groups, normalizing AfD discourse and shifting the Overton window further to the right. The SPD during the Weimar Republic, which had positioned itself as a defender of the working class, repeatedly compromised with conservative forces to maintain political stability, as seen in the SPD's collaboration in suppressing the revolutionary movement by collaborating with fascists, and its support for austerity measures during the Great Depression.
Yep.
And enough has been said about the centrist party's role during that time. The main report at the 7th World Congress of the Comintern in the 30s put it very well. Quote, before the establishment of a fascist dictatorship, bourgeois governments usually pass through a number of preliminary stages and adopt a number of reactionary measures which directly facilitate the accession to power of fascism. Whoever does not fight the reactionary measures of the bourgeoisie and the growth of fascism at these preparatory stages is not in a position to prevent the victory of fascism, but on the contrary, facilitates that victory. However, believe it or not, Höcke is still just the so-called moderate wing compared to other members of the AfD, slowly but surely gaining more and more influence in the emerging party. Publicly, the AfD tries to maintain distance from neo-Nazi organizations. When the NPD encouraged its supporters to vote AfD, the party quickly distanced itself. While the Communist Party of Germany was quickly banned by the post-war West German government, the NPD was left untouched and remains so to this day. It emerged out of an organization whose members defaced synagogues with swastikas and demanded that Jews.
That's interesting. Real interesting. How odd that the Communist Party was banned, still is, but the Nationalist Party is not.
Jews leave Germany. The AfD has a so-called incompatibility list on paper. But evidence tells a different story, making this list meaningless. Let's talk about some of these isolated cases which seem to happen over and over again. One such case is Andreas Kalbitz, once one of the AfD's most powerful figures. He attended marches and even a gathering of a banned group linked to the Hitler Youth. The AfD kicked him out, not for his ideology, but as a strategic move to avoid scrutiny. Yet, he still holds a seat in Brandenburg's state parliament under the AfD faction. In one speech, he said openly what others don't dare to do. Quote, "The AfD is the last evolutionary chance of this country. After that, it's just helmets on." But these so-called isolated cases are anything but rare. Studies show that the AfD gained traction where the NPD was strong. It is argued that the open party laid the groundwork for the AfD's normalization. Behind the scenes, AfD parliamentary offices have hired former NPD candidates and individuals from banned organizations. And these guys are not just at the bottom, but linked to the leadership. Quote, "We differ from the NPD primarily through our bourgeois support base, not so much in terms of content." But it doesn't stop there. One former NPD member who worked as a staffer for the AfD is Marcel Grauf. He's known for having said the following things. "I so desperately wish for a civil war and millions of dead. Women, children, I don't care. It would be so beautiful. I want to piss on corpses and dance on graves. Sieg Heil." At least we now have so many foreigners in the country that a would be worthwhile again. The fact that they generally tend to subhuman behavior is already due to their race. This, surprise surprise, was of course not an isolated case. Another Hitlerite hired by an AfD deputy is convicted Mario Müller. In Brandenburg, the AfD faction's top candidate was active in the Spreelichter, a group banned in 2012 for its ideology. These are just a few examples out of many. AfD youth members have been photographed training in combat sports with members of banned groups. When confronted, the AfD brushed it off as just, quote, "a normal sports club." What is considered normal to many Germans has been shown to be open Nazism and in history already. The fascist movement does not need to win in government in order to find the danger of the workers' movement. Much like in Italy, where the Fasci fought proletarian power to defend private property, the far right today utilizes the threat of the strengthening of left-wing extremism to legitimize support. Quote, "Take the left-wing extremist threat seriously and participate in all possible measures to finally rid the German national body of this tumor. Those bastard Antifa kids of stoned parents should be threatened that next time they'll end up underground. Deport Antifa to Buchenwald, work instead of left-wing terror." The Nazis viewed communists as their main political enemies, and many were among the first detainees in concentration camps.
Yep.
The Bolshevik threat was used by Hitler to centralize state power. While communist organizing is weak at the moment,
the ironic part about this, by the way, is that there are still liberals who look to that and say, and that's why, because the left went too extreme, that the Nazis rose to power. This is a common argument that I hear from liberals in, 2024 and 2023. This is a common argument that I had heard from liberals over and over again, which is so insane because you're assuming the role of historic liberalism that straight up was wrong after the fact.
There is no need to institute a fascist system and undermine formal bourgeois freedoms. But the international progressive and communist movement is growing, and the threat of fascism grows in a dialectical relationship to it. Quote, in short, democracy organized fascism when it felt it could no longer resist the pressure of the working class in conditions even of only formal freedom.
When your mass movement becomes big, and then they will try to suppress you, they will come out with fascism. So before you can have socialism, the capitalist, monopoly capitalist class will unleash fascism under various pretexts. They use chauvinism against immigrants, xenophobia, Islamophobia, and also many other tricks just to hide the roots of the crisis.
As the contradictions of the imperialist system deepen, poverty, climate change, and war continue to drive mass migration, consequences of a global system of exploitation that overwhelmingly benefits capitalists in wealthy nations. Just as they failed a century ago, liberal parties today are incapable of stopping the rise of fascism when they themselves facilitate its rise. What's needed is a movement that stands in defense of the exploited and marginalized. Fascism may not take full control in the immediate future, but it doesn't have to. The fascist movement is already growing, while the liberal capitalist order, just as it is right now, is more than enough of a catastrophe, destroying the planet, impoverishing the working class, and enabling. The time to organize is now, before it's too late.
Relevant threat. The AFD is set to come second and stay out of government, but by pushing anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant, and anti-Palestinian laws to be the political forefront, the AFD has already mainstreamed this agenda and changed the country, forming Stat Raj. I can't say that. The right has pushed the boundaries of what is acceptable, manipulating Germany's culture of atonement into a commitment to defend Israel at all costs, no matter how extreme its actions. This proxy nationalism is defended by an unholy alliance of the right, left, and center. $10 only. Sheesh. What are you talking about? Oh, donors on the video. So this is something that I talked about. This is something that I talked about with Donald Trump. If you remember in that Newsweek article that came out before the election, where I was talking about how sad I was about the election, regardless of whether Kamala Harris wins or loses, that Donald Trump had successfully undermined American politics, or rather destroyed it and then rebuilt it in his own image. This is precisely what's happening with the AFD in Germany. The AFD is also gaining a lot more momentum in this process, but they are simultaneously bringing all the center parties further and further to the right. Center parties, seeing the growth of the AFD, out of fear that the AFD might actually seize power, are basically doing their very best to take on a lot of the right-wing positions of the AFD in an effort to say, hey, you don't need to go to the alternative. We are the alternative. Now, of course, not realizing what happens in that process, I, as an American, am very familiar with this. You become, if you're not the alternative and you become the AFD yourself, is that a good thing? Is that actually a good thing? Like what? You're just going to manage fascism in a more technocratic approach? Is that what it is? And that's the problem, because that process, unironically, also makes people more open-minded to the real thing. The AFD didn't pioneer this idea that anti-Semitism is left-wing, but they jumped on it at the perfect time. The AFD made this explicitly political. They pioneered this as a political weapon within the parliamentary framework with the first draft of the BDS resolution. Germany has been stuck with what Hans Kundani calls Zionist McCarthyism, which we have here in the United States of America as well. The cancellation of events, funding, media campaigns, and police brutality regularly administered to those who criticize Israel's occupation of Palestine and the brutal war in Gaza. The AFD used this. They are utilizing Zionism as a very effective censorship tool. This is what right-wing parties do. The Republican Party is doing the same thing. after years and years of advocating for Nazis to directly march on college campuses and making that the forefront of their political movement, Republicans so quickly turned around and was like, no, anti-Semitism is a major problem in college campuses. We have to create an anti-Semitism task force. Ironically enough, of course, the anti-Semitism task force will obviously target Jewish anti-fascists as well as anti-fascists of every other background. Because for them, it has nothing to do with anti-fascism. Of course, I mean, it has nothing to do with, it has nothing to do with anti-Semitism and everything to do with destroying your enemies in a way that even liberals will look at in a permissible way. Okay? They are building the machinery of censorship in an effort to squash all matter of momentum. Okay? They want to make sure that they just stop all dissent, really. Look no further than the insane 501c3 bill that the Republicans tried to pass and Democrats voted to pass initially in Congress. They wanted to make it so that Trump was the incoming president. Democrats knew this. And in that lame duck period, Democrats who were pro-Israel, Democrats who are pro-Israel literally voted to give the Trump department, the Trump Treasury, awesome powers to decide any and every 501c3 group. Any 501c3 group is actually a group. The funniest thing just happened to me. Look at what I'm quote retweeting now. What? Bernie and his wife skimmed millions from his 2 presidential campaign. Oh, he got quote retweeted by Roger Stone. Bernie and his wife skimmed millions from his 2 presidential campaign. He's an obnoxious, honking loudmouth and a hypocrite. He's driving a top-of-the-line Mercedes and has multiple vacation homes. Kash Patel should do a deep dive on Bernie's finances, and then Bernie could have a federal vacation. Anything just to shut him the up. Oh, God. I hate these people so much. I just joined Die Linke and getting involved in political activism, even though my rough German as is. The DE coverage is helping tremendously in getting caught up to speed. Much love. Hell yeah. I mean, they're just like openly and actively saying like we should jail Bernie Sanders. That's crazy. Those surprised or perplexed by Alice Weidel's marriage, including the BBC, most German gays probably voted for the AfD. I don't know about that. This is a Spectator magazine editorial manager. SourceRomeo.com. What the hell? Yeah. I don't know how reliable this information is. But speaking of which, I do want to get back to something important here. As I have warned, that the chatter from earlier that wished that I kill myself is, of course, received a site-wide ban, unsurprisingly. That's an 8-year-old account that he burned for no reason. But anyway, one thing I want to mention here, okay? We got to talk about this. All right? Remember how I was telling you that time and time again, the Netanyahu administration has shown that they are not really afraid of the growth of the nationalist, fascist, and oftentimes even anti-Semitic movements in Europe. This is yet another great example of such. The far right in Germany, according to Haaretz reporting, is not regarded by Netanyahu government as a threat, but rather as a potential ally. For Israel, the AfD is the cherry on top, providing a platform to continue their shared crusade against Muslims and Palestinians. This is from a report that showed that the Foreign Ministry of Israel quietly started giving assurances to far-right parties all around Europe. Apparently, knowing full well that there was momentum happening on the nationalist front, in Europe, the Israeli government immediately worked to create allegiances with those guys, because obviously they do not care about anti-Semitism. They do not care about the growth of fascism. They actually benefit from it in their minds. They in the short-term period think that this is a beneficial allegiance. Okay, this is something that I've talked about extensively. It's additionally strange to me that people who are liberal Zionists don't understand that they are making allegiances with very dangerous people that will absolutely betray them. Okay? I get why Netanyahu would make these calculated decisions. He is, after all, a fascist. But there are plenty of liberal Zionists out there who don't understand that they're developing allegiances with some truly horrifying, repulsive individuals that do not see the world in the same way that they do, with the exception of Israel. Genuine question, why do people attack you instead of people like Ryan Grimm, Jeremy Scahill, The Intercept, Ken Kuppenstein, Democracy Now? All you do is relay what they're saying? Because they're not accessible content creators. You can't develop a parasocial hatred towards Jeremy Scahill unless he streamed all the time in which case you probably could. It's fine though. I'll tank it. I mean, specifically in the drama sphere chatters, once again, because doing a YouTube drama video on Jeremy Scahill is not going to garner you millions of views. In the same way that if you're a coward, even though you're very obviously pro-Israel, but you're too cowardly to openly admit that, instead of saying that, what can you do? Disparage every pro-Palestinian voice. That way, you, in your mind, get to live the best of both worlds. You get to simultaneously say, I'm pro-Palestinian, guys, but these other pro-Palestinian voices, well, they're far too radical for me. Okay? When in fact, the ultimate goal there is for you to traffic your pro-Zionist opinions. And they oftentimes do come out. Okay? But that is the reality. And unfortunately, many liberals who are not exactly well equipped to understand foreign policy will go along with it because there are a lot of like pre-established quote unquote truths. That's the way reactionary politics works. If you assume a reactionary role, you can basically just say, this is common sense. This guy is bad. For example, you can clip something out of context and then without ever making an argument as to why the argument that I'm presenting is wrong, you can just simply say, this is a bad guy. Look at this bad opinion. Asman watched a slop YouTuber on a smear video about you. That's where the journalist takes are coming from. They think journalists are all bad and you use them to prove you're credible. Yeah, I think a lot of people don't understand that for well-read individuals, yes, the journalists that I work with and rely on for my commentary are credible. And yeah, of course, credible journalists are not going to think I'm a bad person. Sometimes the takes aren't even, here, I'll give you another example. Sometimes the takes aren't even wrong. They're not incorrect, but you can basically just like take a correct position, and as long as like public consciousness is on the opposing side, turn around and say, look at how bad this opinion is. The greatest example I can give you is my statement on the assaults that may or may not have happened on October 7, and the investigative reporting that was conducted that showed that the New York Times' claims that there was serialized rape happening that was directed by Hamas was completely false. Like, there was no evidence whatsoever. Okay? So my assessment of the situation, when I was arguing with a chatter, where I said there is at least one credible firsthand witness testimony on sexual assault that took place, according to the UN investigation, and that sexual assault in moments of war and moments of crisis like this is actually fairly commonplace. So it's not all that erroneous to suspect that there could have been assaults that took place on October 7. However, we don't have enough evidence to correctly identify how widespread this was. When I had that conversation with that person, where I was defending the likelihood of assaults happening on October 7, I also said, regardless of whether assaults happen on October 7 or not, does not change the dynamic for me in terms of the apartheid and in terms of the genocide that Israel is conducting. Okay, rapes does not mean you can do a genocide on an entire group of people, and that's a very normal position to have. I think that if you were to ask people, can you genocide an entire group of people if you suspect some of them of doing rapes? Most people would probably say, I don't know. I don't think that that's appropriate. Right? That statement is objectively a morally correct position. And yet someone can clip that exactly as it is and turn around and say, oh, he's saying rape is resistance. He's saying this is the appropriate way to fight back against Israel. He loves it. Okay? But the video in and of itself that you clipped out of context openly shows it's like is completely unacceptable. Yeah, you can't all Americans because of Abu Ghraib, for example. That would be ridiculous. So even when you show something within context, you can still massage it in a way where people will get upset because they don't understand it. But that's it. That's it. That's where a lot of this anger and resentment comes from, mostly because these issues are, I guess, morally uncomplicated, but can come across as very complicated and even traumatic for a lot of people. And therefore, it's much easier for someone to just be like, see, he's a bad guy. That's it. Anyway, the reason why I don't spend a whole bit of time talking about this over and over again is because it's almost always me having to rehash my positions over and over again to people that seemingly don't care about it. And it's And it gets incredibly unproductive to hyper-focus on it when the world is still continuing and bad things are continuing to happen, oftentimes escalating dramatically. Yeah. So yeah, let's continue. I got a reply on Twitter the other day saying exactly what you just said, using the term he's denying it and he's using the rapes. Yeah, it's idiotic. But that's why I always tell you, like, you can correct the record, and you should. When people come in with that, a lot of people obviously are coming in bad faith. But there are plenty of people who are onlookers who see that bad faith commentary and think it's correct, especially if they see it over and over again. So yes, if you feel the need to correct that, then you can do that, you know? You need to pin all your positions in chat and never talk about it again. Yeah, that's really funny because chatters can't even read the title of the stream. Chatters can't read any of the pinned comments on the stream. Chatters refuse to read in general. So pinning that somewhere is not going to be helpful at all. But yeah, these people are gross. If you are pro-Israel, you're gross. Sorry, you're a bad person. And I expect